So here we are looking at embedding research. Our aim for today is to recognise the importance of using research in your coursework and to identify a variety of ways you could embed your research and to identify how you can use your research to meet the assessment criteria and ultimately make your writing more interesting. Your task for your coursework is to imagine that you're a freelance journalist. You need to write an engaging and entertaining article that a newspaper or magazine will publish. Think about the ramifications. If you don't write an engaging and entertaining article that will be published, you're not going to be able to pay your bills. So, as well as being engaging and entertaining, your article needs to be supported by research. It must be accurate or it's not going to get published, or even worse, you could get sued. When using quotes, you need to think about providing a context for your quotation. So, introduce your quote, set the scene, where and when it was spoken or written. Ensure that you mention the source and where it's come from, so who's speaking, perhaps where was it published. And finally, you need to explain the significance of the quotation. You can't just say, such and such said this. You need to explain how that proves your point. So there are several ways that you can quote, and the first one is using block quotes. You should really think hard about whether you should use these or not, because they disrupt the flow of the text, so it really needs to be something very significant to be worthy of a block quote. So I've got an example here, and it starts, Syria descended into civil war following mass protests against Assad's regime. BBC.co.uk explained the extent of the crisis. And my block quote is, by June 2013 the UN said 90,000 people had been killed in the conflict. However, by August 2014 that figure had more than doubled to 191,000 and continued to climb to 250,000 by August 2015, according to activists and the UN. Unfortunately, the conflict is now more than just a battle between those for or against President Assad. So, you didn't necessarily need to use this block quote. You could have broken that up and it probably would have been more engaging and more relevant. But you can see here, I've introduced where it's come from and what's going to come. Then I've got the block quote and you can see it's indented so that it stands apart from the rest of the text, and then I've explained the relevance, or I've made a bit of a link at the bottom. Our next quote is the use of embedded quotes, and you should use these the most because they help keep the flow of your writing, and they should clearly flow and be grammatically correct. So here's my example. According to BBC.co.uk, the beginning of the crisis in Syria can be traced back to March 2011 and the southern city of Daraa after the arrest and torture of some teenagers who painted revolutionary signs on a school wall when security forces opened fire on demonstrators. You can see here I've added an and put it in brackets to make the sentence make sense. It's still got to flow grammatically. So if you need to add things, you can put them in brackets, like this, or you can take things out and replace them with an ellipsis, which is 3 dots. For more tips on embedding quotes, you can go to this link here, and in your lesson there is this link is in one of the boxes. So the next thing you want to think about doing is making references to the articles that you've used for your sources. So you can support your point, you can show that you've read an article, but you don't necessarily have to quote them. So for example, I've written BBC.co.uk recently published an article that attempted to explain the conflict in Syria in 8 simple steps. At first, there's a typo there, I felt that this was trying to simplify the conflict, but in reality it was trying to enable more people to understand a very complex situation. So I haven't quoted from it, but I have made reference to it and I've explained the effect of that article. And the last thing that you might want to try is paraphrasing. So this is just summarising or condensing an argument or idea to support or explain a point. So you could summarise or condense a whole article into a couple of sentences, which is a perfectly valid way of showing your research and supporting a point. So my example is, as explained in the bbc.co.uk article, Syria, the story of the conflict, the current crisis in Syria cannot be apportioned to one person, nation, faction or incident. It is suggested that instead, things have snowballed following the serious abuse of human rights, civil war and unrest. Many factions and nations have used the unrest for their own means, leading to the humanitarian crisis we have today. So I've just basically summarised what was quite a long, lengthy article into a couple of sentences. So how does this fit with your assessment? You need to, as you know, aim for Band 4 here. So you have to, at the very least, show clear and effective use of source information. We hope that you might aim for Band 5 here, where you might show assured and independent integration of your source information. And if you're going even higher, we're looking for sophisticated and independent integration and adaptation of source information. So you're really doing something with your sources and you're not just transferring information.